Jeff Cairns is a lawyer with Leonard Street and Diner. He advises employers on ERISA, which I have to admit I have no idea what that is. That, you know, in marketing, whatever. And employee benefit matters, including qualified and non-qualified pension and profit sharing plans, ESOPs, welfare, and fringe benefit plans. The other really unique thing that I did not know, Jeff is a certified public accountant as well. He's a frequent lecturer at the Minnesota Continuing Legal Education. He's been recognized as a super lawyer by Minnesota Law and Politics and was named among the best lawyers in America in the area of employee benefit law. Jeff is he's currently a member of the Board of Trustees for the William Mitchell College of Law. He's a past board member of the Downtown Rotary Club, vice president, as well as chaired the Grants and Allocation Committee for a number of years, which is a big job. And then his list of volunteer and civic activities is like this long. So he's done all kinds of things, but when you get beyond some of the work things, and that's really it. That's just off the top of my head. I hope that was okay.
Thank you, Paul. Just want to introduce our other guest at the table today, Ed Oliver. I think everyone knows Ed. He's a former state senator, and you'll see the connection here shortly. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker of today, Bill Blazar. Bill just completed 20 years on the staff of the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce, where he is Senior Vice President of Public Affairs and Business Development. After many years as the Chief Lobbyist and Head of Policy for the largest business trade association in the state, Bill took on a new challenge, heading up Grow Minnesota, which is the Chamber's statewide business retention and expansion program. You'll hear more about that shortly. Bill is a past member and chair of the board of Minnesota Government Relations Council. He served in a leadership capacity with Minnesota's P16 Education Partnership, the Minnesota Health Data Institute, the Citizens League, and the Lake Calhoun Sailing School and the City of Lake's Nordic Ski Foundation, which he says was a connection, some activities of his children. So there's a theme here. His boys were very active in Nordic skiing, particularly in high school and college. Before joining the Chamber, Bill was a member of the Government Affairs, manager of Government Affairs for Target Corporation. And before Target, he was a public policy analyst, freelance, specializing in state and local fiscal policy, economic development, and telecommunications. Bill has a BA in political science from Northwestern University and a master's in public affairs from the U of M's Humphrey Institute. He's a Columbus, Ohio native and is married to Mary, who owns a landscape business. And as I mentioned, he has 3 sons, Aaron, Micah, and Jeremy, who all graduated from the Minneapolis public school system. Bill, like myself, loves fishing and canoeing, and he plans to do one or both of those things as soon as he completes his address today. Please welcome Bill Blazar to the greatest podium in Minneapolis.
Jeff is exactly right. I'm headed up north, and we always start fishing optimistically, and then sometimes on the way home we understand why it's called fishing and not catching. But as you know, was referenced, at the time in the boat, the time in the car with your friends and your children, anybody who's young here, somebody told me that you should cherish those days because they go by a lot quicker than you think. Well, that's absolutely true. It's gone before you know it. What I'd like to do today is talk to you about the Chamber's Grow Minnesota program. And actually, on your table, I've got copies of the slides, so if you can't see them, they're there. But if you look at this slide, everything I'm going to tell you really I can boil down to to 3 words. Innovate, export, and workers. So Grow Minnesota is basically eyes and ears on Minnesota's economy. And it's not just eyes and ears on the way the economy is growing, but also on how it's developing and changing. And actually, from our 9-year experience with this program, it's frankly more important to understand how the economy is changing than it is to know that it's growing. What we've learned is that if the change isn't occurring, the economy isn't going to grow. And then toward the end, I want to focus a little bit on workforce and what we're hearing about the state's workforce, because Jeff told me that this Rotary Club has had emphasis on educational workforce, so I thought I'd spend a few minutes and just tell you what we're learning there. So the 3 words, in terms of development, that references innovation, which you're going to see as a really important indicator of how our state's economy is doing. Exporting turns out to be critical to growth now, and I would guess over the next decade. And then the workforce, our state's workers are probably the hallmark of our economy. And they have been for a long time, and I think our future prospects will depend on that in the future. So let me tell you what Grow Minnesota is. It's a business retention program. It's the Minnesota Chamber's effort to convince Minnesota companies to stay and grow in our state. We run it with 57 partners around the state. You can see those. They're all local chambers of commerce, including, for example, the Minneapolis Regional Chamber. And it really, while the focus is on retention, we also do a lot of work with respect to business assistance and business expansion. I'll tell you more about that in a minute here. So when we do a retention visit, and this is going to sound maybe either simple or maybe even trite, we do 3 things. We say thank you to the company for being in Minnesota and employing Minnesotans. And I can't tell you the number of times that I've gone on a retention visit. I did one, in fact, this morning, where the person across the table says to me and a volunteer like Jeff Cairns, who might go with me, they point to the chair I'm sitting in or the volunteer is sitting in and say, "You're the first person to sit in that chair who came here to thank me for having a business in Minnesota, who then did not go on to ask me for a donation, ask me to join something, or put my name on a list." And Minnesota companies have so many more options today in terms of where they grow and where they expand, that this simple act of saying thank you is actually pretty important. So we also then learn a lot about the company, and we always ask them, what can we do to help you stay here and grow here? So that gets us into the business assistance business. And then finally, to go back to the traditional mission of the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce, we ask about things that the governor, the legislature, our policymakers, people like former Senator Oliver, could do to make this a better place to do business. I'm going to report on what we're hearing from companies based on the visits we've been doing this year. 2012. In 2011, we saw about 1,000 companies. Year to date, we've seen probably 400 or 500, but I've got data on 254 visits. So that's going to be my basis here. And what's interesting, in those 254 one-on-one visits, we're seeing about 1/3 of those companies for the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th time. A big part of our purpose with Grow Minnesota is to increase the attachment of a company to the state. So we're trying to build relationships. So you got to go back and see them. Now, we're not trying to be their best friend or to take up more time in a busy day, but we are trying to build that relationship. So far this year, we've helped 23 businesses, but last year, the full calendar year, we worked with about 125 companies and protected about 4,900 Minnesota jobs. And just to give you an idea of some of the kinds of problems that we solve, I thought I'd just mention 3 of them to you. There is a, when we talk to a company, we ask them about whether or not they're able to get the supplies, the inputs that they need to operate their company efficiently. And we ask them where they're getting things and if they could get them more efficiently, or if they're interested in a Minnesota supplier. So this last year, we matched a southern Minnesota manufacturer with a St. Cloud contract manufacturer. The company was having its work done in China. We brought that work back to St. Cloud. We worked with a hipping company that needed to find a fabricator in southern Minnesota. We found 3 of them, and they're in the process of working out a fabricating relationship. This is work that was being done either outside of Minnesota or not being done at all. We spend a lot of time helping Minnesota companies get air and water quality permits. We worked just this week on a permit problem for an Owatonna business that the company was trying to file the permit electronically, and the state system wasn't working. I'm sure that's a shock to everybody. And so what we did is made it so that the company could actually file the paperwork the old-fashioned way, which was to carry the paper to the agency. And then with increasing frequency, we work with companies related to their electricity bills. It's a rising expense for many Minnesota companies. Just in the last 2 months, we've worked with 2 companies to try and work with their local utility to get a better rate on electricity. And my guess is over the next year or so, we'll do a lot more of that work because Minnesota companies are becoming much more electricity intensive. So we find roughly 1 out of 8 of our Grow Minnesota visits triggers a request for help. And most of the time we can solve the problem. That's one of the great things about Minnesota, is that there are resources to help companies be successful. They're not always easy to find, and that's where Grow Minnesota comes in. But my experience is that even when you have to call up the business and say, look, you asked us to do X, we worked at it, we really tried, we just couldn't find the resource, you've still made a friend for life. Because they appreciate the fact that somebody A, reached out, and B, tried to help them. There are over 100,000 businesses in Minnesota. We only see about 1,000 a year, so we're not going to see them all. So we also run an electronic online business assistance service called the Business Connection. If you get time in your office, go to the site and use it. It's a great way to find answers to questions about doing business in Minnesota. Last year, it not only helped 1,000 companies through linking them with resources in the state, but then brought 100 inquiries to us about doing business in Minnesota.